The diner smelled like coffee, bacon, and dreams that never quite made it out of the door. It was the kind of place where the coffee pot never stopped dripping, where the neon open sign flickered like a tired heartbeat, and where people came to talk about what could have been if only life had been kinder. Emily Parker stood behind the counter, wearing her faded blue apron, a pencil tucked behind her ear and a weary smile that fooled almost everyone. She had been working at Randy's diner for 8 years, long enough to memorize the sound of the doorbell when it opened, long enough to know which regular would complain about burnt toast, and long enough to feel trapped between tips and time. She didn't hate her job, she hated the limits it placed on her. She was 27, living in a small apartment in downtown San Francisco, still paying off student loans for a business degree she never had the chance to use. Life, as it often does, had interrupted her plans, and her father's stroke, her mother's passing, and the endless bills that followed had forced her to drop her ambitions and pick up a trade. But Emily had something most people didn't: a mind that refused to quit. Every night after her shift, she'd sit by her tiny kitchen window, drinking cold coffee, staring at her notebook filled with ideas, pages and pages of sketches, plans, and business models, everything from a new type of coffee delivery service to a small clothing brand inspired by her mother's vintage style. The ideas changed every few weeks, but the dream stayed constant. She wanted to build something of her own. One rainy Thursday evening, her life began to shift. A man in a gray suit walked into the diner, tall, sharp, the kind of person who looked like he belonged in a skyscraper, not under fluorescent lights at midnight. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee, and opened his laptop. His name, as she'd later learn, was Jonathan Crane, a venture capitalist who was temporarily in the city for a tech conference. "You look like you're building a business plan," Emily joked as she poured him a refill. He glanced up, surprised. "How'd you guess?" She smiled. "That's what I do when I'm off the clock." He laughed softly. You run a business?" "Not yet," she said, tapping her notebook that she always carried in her apron pocket. "But someday." "Tell me," he said, curious. So she did. She told him about her latest idea, a digital platform that would connect local artisans and independent cafes, helping them reach customers through a shared marketplace. "Think Etsy meets Uber Eats," she said, her eyes alive with energy. Jonathan listened, genuinely intrigued. "You really thought this through?" "I've had a lot of long nights and empty tables," she replied. When his check came, he left a generous tip on his business card. "Call me," he said, "if you're serious." For 3 days, Emily stared at that card like it was a ticket to another life. Then she called. They meet again, at this time at a small cafe tilde copyright downtown. Jonathan introduced her to a small group of investors looking for fresh ideas. She pitched her concept with the confidence she didn't know she had, using napkin sketches and raw numbers. She didn't have a PowerPoint, but she had passion, and somehow that was enough. Jonathan leaned back and said, "You're rough, but you've got something real." With his help, Emily found a small team of developers and designers who believed in her vision. They worked out of her apartment, fueled by takeout noodles and determination. Her savings, barely $5,000, vanished in weeks. There were nights when she wanted to give up, when the code didn't work, when the investors went quiet, when she felt like a fraud. But she remembered the diner, the smell of coffee, the sound of the register, and the faces of people who would never leave that place. She couldn't go back. After 6 months of chaos, frustration, and sleepless nights, Handmade Hub was born. It started small, a platform where local artisans could list handmade products, and neighborhood cafes could feature them in pop-up displays. The concept blended community with commerce, and it worked better than anyone expected. By the end of the first year, they had over 200 sellers and partnerships with dozens of cafes across the Bay Area. Then came the break. A famous lifestyle influencer stumbled upon the platform, posting a glowing review about the app that's saving small creators. Overnight, traffic exploded, orders tripled. Emily's phone didn't stop buzzing. Within months, Handmade Hub went national. Investors who once ignored her now flooded her inbox. She finally rented an office, not a fancy one, but a space with real desks and sunlight. Her small team grew into 50 employees. One afternoon, as she stood by the window of her new office, looking out over the city, Jonathan walked in with 2 coffees. "Remember Randy's Diner?" he asked. "How could I forget?" She laughed. "That place started it all." He smiled. "You should buy it someday." She thought he was joking, until 2 years later, she did. When Emily walked back into Randy's Diner as its new owner, the neon sign still flickered, the coffee still burned a little, and the regulars still grumbled about the same things. But now, she wasn't just the waitress behind the counter, she was the woman who built an empire. She kept the diner exactly the same, except for one addition: a framed photo behind the register. It showed her old apron, her first notebook, and a caption that read, "Dreams brewed here." But the story didn't end there. Success, as Emily learned, comes with a price. As Handmade Hub grew, investors began pushing for changes: more automation, less focus on small creators, higher profit margins. The heart of her business, the community, was at risk. She argued. She fought. But money talks, and soon, the company she built started to drift from the vision she loved. Then came a merger proposal, a massive offer from a global tech giant that wanted to absorb Handmade Hub into their portfolio. The deal was worth over $300 million. Everyone told her to sign, but Emily hesitated. One night, she drove back to the diner, the only place she still felt grounded. The night shift waitress, a young girl named Kara, was wiping down tables, looking just as tired and hopeful as Emily had once been. "You look like you're thinking about something big," Kara said. "I am," Emily admitted. "I'm deciding whether to sell something I built from nothing." Kara poured her coffee. "My mom always says, if you have to think that hard, it's probably not right." Emily smiled. "Your mom's a smart woman." The next morning, she walked into the boardroom and said number. The room went silent. Her investors were furious. Jonathan, who had become both mentor and friend, looked at her with quiet respect. "I didn't build this company to sell it," she said. "I built it to help people like me, people who just need someone to believe in their ideas." The deal collapsed. Stockholders left. The press called her foolish. But the people, the creators, the small businesses, the dreamers, rallied around her. Handmade Hub became more than a company, it became a movement. Within 2 years, the platform expanded globally, now run by local partners in multiple countries. Emily's name became synonymous with ethical entrepreneurship. She started foundations to fund young creators and programs for women in business. Her empire wasn't built on money, it was built on purpose. Years later, during an interview, a journalist asked her, "What made you think you could go from waitress to CEO?" Emily laughed softly. "Because when you've spent years serving others, you learn what people need. Business isn't about selling, it's about understanding." She looked out the window, her reflection merging with the skyline she once only dreamed of. "And besides," she added, "I never wanted to be rich. I just wanted to prove that a waitress could build an empire." The interviewer smiled. "And now that you have," Emily paused, her eyes distant but warm, "now I teach others to build theirs." The next morning, as sunlight spilled across the city, Randy's Diner opened its doors as usual. But this time, the corner table by the window, once Emily's station, was reserved for something special. A small sign read, "Reserved for dreamers." And every day, someone new sat there, a writer scribbling notes, an artist sketching designs, a student working on a business plan. Because in the diner, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of coffee, one waitress had proven something the world too often forgets: greatness can start anywhere. even behind a counter, even with a tray in your hand and a dream in your heart, even when no one believes in you yet. And so, the waitress who built an empire kept her promise to herself, not to escape where she came from, but to make sure no one else ever had to give up their dreams the way she almost did. And every time the doorbell rang and a new customer walked in, she'd smile, pour their coffee, and whisper to herself, "This is where it all began."